Story 1. When I moved into the house on Briar Hill Road, the attic wasn't something I thought much about. The house itself was old but cheap, which was the only reason I could afford it. It had been on the market for nearly a year before I bought it, and the real estate agent seemed almost relieved when I signed the papers. It was a 2-story wooden house with creaky floors, narrow hallways, and tall windows that let in just enough sunlight to keep the place from feeling abandoned. The attic sat above the second floor, accessible through a pull-down ladder in the hallway ceiling. During the house tour, the agent mentioned it casually. "Just storage space," she said. I never even bothered to climb up and look at it. At least not at first. The first week in the house was quiet, too quiet sometimes. But I assumed that was because I had lived in a crowded apartment building before this. Houses make different sounds. Wood expands. Pipes move. Roofs settle. It was normal. The first strange noise came on the 8th night. I was lying in bed around midnight when I heard something moving above the ceiling. A slow, dragging sound, like something heavy sliding across the attic floor. At first I assumed it was an animal. Maybe a raccoon or a large rat had gotten inside the roof. The sound lasted about 10 seconds. Then it stopped. The silence that followed felt strange, but eventually I fell asleep. The next night it happened again. The same dragging noise. Slow, heavy, moving from one side of the attic to the other. This time it lasted longer, nearly a full minute. I sat up in bed listening. The house was otherwise silent. Then the noise stopped again. The next morning I bought a flashlight and decided to check the attic. The hallway ceiling had a square hatch with a rope hanging down from it. When I pulled the rope, the ladder unfolded slowly. Dust fell from the ceiling as it opened. The attic smelled old, dry wood and insulation. I climbed halfway up the ladder and shined my flashlight inside. The beam revealed a wide open space with wooden beams running along the roof. There were a few cardboard boxes left behind by the previous owners. Nothing unusual. No animals. No movement. I climbed the rest of the way up and walked across the creaky wooden boards. The boxes contained random junk, old magazines, broken lamps, a stack of yellowed newspapers. Nothing that explained the noise. I checked the corners carefully for animal nests. There were none. Eventually, I climbed back down and closed the hatch. For the rest of the day, I tried not to think about it. But that night, the sound returned. And this time, it was louder. The dragging noise moved directly across the ceiling above my bedroom. Back and forth. Back and forth. Like something pacing. The sound lasted nearly 5 minutes before finally stopping. By the 4th night, I couldn't ignore it anymore. The dragging sound began earlier in the evening and continued longer each time. Sometimes it sounded like footsteps. Other times it sounded like something crawling. The worst part was the pattern. Whatever was up there seemed to move in circles, over and over again, like it was trapped. On the 5th night, I heard something new. A soft thump, right above the attic hatch. Then silence. I sat up slowly in bed. The hallway outside my room looked dark and still. The attic ladder was only 10 feet from my bedroom door. For several minutes, I just listened. Nothing happened. Finally, I convinced myself to get up. I grabbed my flashlight and walked into the hallway. The attic hatch looked exactly the same as always. Closed. Still. I stood there staring at it. Then the rope hanging from the hatch moved. Just slightly. Like something above had brushed against it. My heart began pounding. I waited. The rope moved again. This time more noticeably. Something was definitely up there. I told myself it was just an animal again. But animals don't move ropes. Still, I reached up and pulled it. The attic ladder unfolded slowly. Dust fell again as it dropped down. I climbed halfway up and shined the flashlight inside. The attic looked exactly the same as before. Empty, silent. But something felt wrong. The air felt colder. I climbed the rest of the way up and stepped onto the wooden boards. The beam of my flashlight moved slowly across the room. Boxes, beams, insulation, nothing else. Then I noticed something strange near the far wall. A narrow wooden door. I was certain it hadn't been there before. It was small, maybe 4 feet tall, built into the slanted wall beneath the roof. The wood looked darker than the surrounding boards, like it had been added later. I walked toward it slowly. The door had no handle, just a small metal latch. The moment I touched it, the dragging noise returned, but this time it wasn't above me. It was behind the door. Something inside the small space was moving, slowly scraping against the floor. I stepped back immediately. My mind raced. The attic had been empty before. I was sure of it. So what was inside that hidden room? The scraping stopped. Silence returned. Then a soft knock came from the other side of the door. 3 gentle taps. I felt my throat tighten. Then a voice spoke. "Hello?" The voice sounded weak, almost childlike. I froze. "Is someone there?" the voice asked. For a moment, I thought it might be a kid trapped in the attic somehow. Maybe the previous owners had sealed off a storage space and someone had gotten stuck inside. But that didn't make sense. The house had been empty for months before I bought it. Still, I stepped closer. "Who's in there?" I asked. The voice sounded relieved. "Oh, thank God." My heart pounded harder. "How long have you been in there?" The answer came quickly. "I don't know." The voice sounded shaky now. "I've been waiting for someone to open the door." I stared at the small latch. Something about the situation felt wrong. Very wrong. "How did you get in there?" I asked. A pause followed. Then the voice answered quietly. "He put me here." A cold chill ran down my spine. "Who did?" Another pause. Then the voice whispered, "You." The words hit me like a punch. "What are you talking about?" But the voice didn't answer. Instead, something moved again inside the hidden space. Heavy, slow, like something large shifting its weight. The wooden boards beneath my feet creaked. I suddenly noticed something else about the door. Scratches. Deep claw marks covering the inside edges of the wood. Like something had been trying to claw its way out. My flashlight beam shook as I stepped backward. Then the voice spoke again. But it sounded different now. Lower. Stronger. "You locked me in here." My chest tightened. "That's not possible." The voice laughed softly. "Yes, it is." The latch suddenly rattled under my hand. Something slammed into the door from the inside. The entire wall shook. I stumbled backward in shock. Another slam hit the door. Harder this time. The wood cracked slightly along the edges. "You promised you'd let me out," the voice said. "But you forgot." My mind spun, trying to understand. "I've never been here before," I said. The voice grew louder. "Yes, you have." The door shook violently as something rammed it again from inside. The wood splintered slightly near the latch. My flashlight beam fell across the floor near my feet. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. A photograph lying among the dusty boards. I picked it up slowly. The photo showed the attic. The same attic I was standing in now. And in the picture, I was standing beside the small door, holding a hammer, nailing it shut. Behind me, inside the small dark space, something pale and thin reached through the opening, and the face staring out from the darkness looked exactly like mine. The door behind me exploded open, and the thing that crawled out of the hidden room smiled, because it was finally free. And now, it could put me back where I belonged. Story 2. I first heard him on a Tuesday night. Not footsteps, not loud banging, just a soft shifting sound above the ceiling, like someone adjusting their weight carefully so the floorboards wouldn't creak. I froze in bed and held my breath. The house was old, and old houses made noises. Pipes groaned, wood expanded, The wind rattled things that didn't want to be rattled. I told myself it was just that. But the sound came again. A slow, deliberate step. Then another. Not the random movement of an animal. Not the scratching of rats. Footsteps. Someone was walking in my attic. I sat up in bed and listened. The steps stopped instantly. Like whoever was up there had realized I was awake. The silence that followed felt thick and heavy. After a few minutes, I lay back down and tried to convince myself it had been nothing. Eventually, I fell asleep. But the next night, the footsteps returned. And the night after that, always late, always slow, always careful. Like someone trying very hard not to be heard. I had lived in the house for 6 months before the noises started. It was a narrow 2-story home on a quiet street where nothing ever seemed to happen. I worked remotely as a data analyst, so most days I never even left the house. Just me, my laptop, and the quiet. At first, the quiet had been peaceful. Then it slowly became something else. The attic access was in the hallway ceiling outside my bedroom. One of those pull-down ladders with a rope hanging from a square wooden hatch. During the house inspection, I had briefly climbed up there. The attic had been empty except for insulation and dusty wooden beams. No storage, no furniture, no reason for anyone to be up there, which meant there shouldn't have been footsteps. After the 4th night, I decided to check. It was around midnight when I grabbed a flashlight and stepped into the hallway. The rope hung motionless from the attic hatch. Everything looked normal. But when I placed my ear against the ceiling, I heard something shift directly above me. The faint scrape of a shoe on wood. My heart began beating harder. I grabbed the rope and pulled. The ladder unfolded slowly with a series of metallic clicks. Dust floated down through the beam of my flashlight. For several seconds, I just stood there, staring into the darkness above. Nothing moved. No sound came from the attic. I climbed halfway up the ladder and raised the flashlight. The beam revealed exactly what I expected. Wooden beams, pink insulation, dust, empty space, no man, no movement. I climbed all the way up just to be sure. The attic was maybe 20 feet long and 10 feet wide, tapering into the roof on both sides. There was nowhere to hide. No boxes, no furniture, no hidden corners. Just open space. I stayed up there for a few minutes listening. Nothing happened. Eventually, I climbed back down and closed the hatch. That night, I slept better. For exactly 1 night. The footsteps returned 2 days later. This time, they sounded closer, slower, heavier, and they lasted longer. I lay awake listening to the pattern. 3 steps. Pause. 3 more steps. Pause again. It sounded like pacing, back and forth across the attic floor. The worst part wasn't the sound itself. It was the intention behind it. Whoever was up there knew I was below, and they were moving anyway. The next morning, I checked the attic again. Still empty, but something had changed. The insulation near the center of the attic looked disturbed, compressed, like someone had been sitting there. I crouched down and touched it. The fibers were flattened in a circular shape, about the size of a person. My stomach twisted. Someone had definitely been here. But where had they gone? There was no exit except the hatch. And I had closed it myself. The police didn't take it seriously. Probably an animal, the officer said after glancing briefly around the house. Raccoons can sound like people sometimes. I told him I had checked the attic. Twice. Empty. He shrugged. Then it's nothing. That night I installed a small motion camera in the attic. I pointed it toward the center of the floor and connected it to my phone. If anyone went up there, I would know. I slept with my phone beside my pillow. At 2:13 a.m., the alert woke me. Motion detected. My heart raced as I opened the camera feed. The attic appeared on the screen. Empty. Then something moved at the edge of the frame. A shadow sliding across the floor. Slow, careful. I stared harder. A man stepped into view. He was tall and thin, wearing dark clothes. His face looked pale in the dim infrared light. He crouched low near the center of the attic and looked directly at the camera. Then he smiled and reached up. The feed went black. I didn't sleep at all that night. I stayed in my bedroom with the door locked, listening, waiting. Around dawn, I finally heard the attic hatch creak softly. The ladder unfolded slowly, metal hinges clicking quietly. Then footsteps descended the ladder, one step at a time. I held my breath. The hallway floor creaked. Someone was inside my house, walking toward my bedroom. I grabbed the baseball bat beside my bed. The footsteps stopped outside the door. Silence. Then a soft knock. 3 taps. My throat tightened. "Hello?" a voice said through the door. The voice sounded calm, friendly even. "I know you're awake." I didn't answer. "I live up there," he continued. "In the attic." I tightened my grip on the bat. "You're not supposed to be in my house," I said. He chuckled softly. "That's the funny thing." "What?" "This is my house." Cold dread filled my chest. "I bought this place 6 months ago." Another soft laugh. "No," he said. "You moved into it." The hallway floor creaked again. He leaned closer to the door. "You really don't remember, do you?" My pulse pounded in my ears. "Remember what?" His voice dropped lower. "You built the attic room." A chill ran down my spine. "What room?" There was a pause. Then he whispered through the door. "The one you locked me in." For several seconds I couldn't speak. "That's impossible," I said finally. "You're confused." "Am I?" he replied calmly. The door handle rattled slightly. Locked. He didn't try to force it. Instead, he spoke softly. "You found me wandering the street last winter." My mind struggled to follow. "You said you wanted to help." Images flickered at the edge of my memory. A snowy sidewalk. A man sitting alone under a streetlight. Thin. Hungry. "You let me stay here," the voice continued. "But then you changed your mind." My hands began shaking. "I didn't. You were afraid I'd take your house." A dull thud hit the door as he rested his forehead against it. "So you built the little room in the attic." Something inside my chest tightened painfully. "You locked me inside," he said. "And you waited." My breathing became shallow. "That's not real." "Then why do you keep checking the attic?" he asked quietly. "Why do you wake up every night listening?" I had no answer. He stepped away from the door. The floor creaked under his weight. "You tried to forget," he said. "But forgetting doesn't make things disappear." I heard him walking toward the hallway, toward the attic ladder. "Wait," I said suddenly. The footsteps stopped. "Are you going back up there?" I asked. "Yes." "Why?" His answer came gently. "Because that's where you said I belong." The ladder creaked again as he climbed, step by step. Then the hatch closed. Silence returned to the house. The next morning, I climbed into the attic again. But this time, I searched more carefully. And I found it. Behind a sheet of plywood nailed to the far wall. A small hidden door, barely 3 feet tall. My hands trembled as I pulled the nails loose. The door creaked open slowly. Inside was a cramped wooden space barely large enough for someone to sit. The floor was covered in scratch marks, deep ones, and carved into the wall were hundreds of small tally marks, counting days. I felt dizzy, because at the back of the tiny room, I saw something else. A mirror, cracked down the center. I stepped closer and looked into it. My reflection stared back at me. But behind my reflection, someone was standing in the attic, watching me, smiling. When I turned around, the attic was empty, but the hatch behind me was open, and the ladder was already pulled down, which meant the man from the attic was no longer up there. He was somewhere else in the house, and this time, He wasn't hiding. Story 3. I noticed the attic door for the first time 3 days after moving in. That probably sounds strange. Most people inspect every part of a new house the moment they buy it. But when you move alone and most of your time is spent working, unpacking, and trying to adjust to silence, some details slip past you. The house was small and narrow, built sometime in the 1950s according to the listing. 2 floors, 1 bedroom, a cramped kitchen, and a hallway ceiling with a square wooden hatch that led to the attic. I hadn't opened it yet. At first, I didn't think there was any reason to. The first sound came late at night. I was sitting at my desk in the living room finishing a report when something creaked above me. Not a loud creak, just a faint shift of wood. I looked up instinctively. The ceiling stared back at me, still and silent. I shrugged it off. Old houses made noises. Everyone knew that. But about 10 minutes later, I heard something else. A soft step, then another. My hands froze above the keyboard. The sound had come from directly above the hallway, which meant it had come from the attic. I listened carefully. Nothing. The house returned to its normal quiet. After a while, I convinced myself it had been my imagination. Maybe a bird on the roof. Maybe the wind. I finished my work and went to bed. The next night it happened again, but this time the footsteps lasted longer. Slow, measured, back and forth, like someone pacing. I sat up in bed listening. Every step felt deliberate, careful. Whoever was up there seemed to be trying not to make noise, but the floorboards betrayed them. My heart started beating harder. There was no way someone could be in the attic. The hatch had never been opened, at least not by me. Still, the idea lodged itself in my mind and refused to leave. Someone was walking above my ceiling. Eventually, the footsteps stopped, but I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, I grabbed a chair and stood beneath the attic hatch. A short rope hung down from a small metal hook. I hesitated before pulling it. Then the ladder unfolded slowly from the ceiling with a series of metallic clicks. Dust fell into the air. The smell of old wood drifted down. I grabbed a flashlight and climbed halfway up. The attic looked empty. Wooden beams stretched along the roof. Insulation covered the floor. Cobwebs hung in the corners. I climbed the rest of the way and walked carefully across the boards. Nothing moved. Nothing breathed. Nothing hid. There were no boxes. No furniture. No signs anyone had ever been there. After a few minutes, I climbed back down. Maybe the sounds really had been the house settling. I closed the hatch and tried to forget about it. That night, the footsteps returned, and this time they stopped directly above my bedroom. I stared at the ceiling, listening, waiting. A slow creak moved across the attic floor, then silence, then a single step. Directly above my head, my skin prickled. Someone was standing there, right above me, listening. Over the next week, the pattern continued. Every night around 2 a.m., the footsteps would start, slow pacing. Sometimes soft scratching sounds too, like fingernails brushing wood. I checked the attic every morning. Every time it was empty, but something began to change. Small things. The insulation would be slightly shifted, dust patterns disturbed. Once I found a footprint, a faint one, barefoot, too large to belong to a child. I stared at it for a long time before climbing back down. Someone had definitely been there. But where were they going during the day? There was no other entrance, no window, only the hatch, which meant they had to be inside the house, somewhere. I installed a camera in the attic the following night, a simple motion sensor camera connected to my phone. If someone went up there again, I would see them. I placed it on one of the beams facing the center of the floor. Then I closed the hatch and went to bed. The notification woke me at 2:07 a.m. Motion detected. My pulse jumped as I opened the camera feed. The attic appeared on my screen in grainy night vision. At first it looked empty, then the image shifted slightly. A figure stepped into view. He was thin, pale, and barefoot. His hair hung over his eyes as he crouched low near the center of the attic. I held my breath. He slowly lifted his head and looked directly at the camera. His face filled the screen. For a moment, I thought he looked familiar. Then he smiled and whispered something. The audio barely picked it up, but I heard it clearly. He's watching us. Then the screen went black. I ran into the hallway immediately. The attic hatch hung open, the ladder already pulled down. My stomach twisted. Someone had come down into my house. I grabbed a kitchen knife and moved slowly through the hallway. "Hello?" I called. No answer. The living room was empty. The kitchen was empty. The bathroom was empty. No doors had opened. No windows were broken. The house felt completely still. But something had changed. The silence now felt occupied, like someone was standing just out of sight, watching. That night I barely slept. The footsteps didn't return. Neither did the man. The next morning, I went into the attic again. But this time I noticed something I had missed before. Near the back wall, a section of wood looked newer than the rest. A square panel about 3 feet wide. My chest tightened. I pried it loose carefully. Behind it was a narrow crawl space between the walls. Dark, deep, and inside it, a mattress, a water bottle, food wrappers. Someone had been living in my attic for weeks, maybe longer. My stomach turned, but something else caught my attention. Carved into the wood beside the mattress were words, dozens of them. The same sentence repeated over and over again. He thinks this is his house. My throat went dry, because beneath that sentence, there was another one, written more recently, in fresher scratches. Soon he will remember. That night the footsteps returned again, but they didn't stay in the attic. I heard them moving across the ceiling, then down the ladder, then through the hallway, until they stopped outside my bedroom door. I sat frozen in bed, listening. A soft voice came through the wood. "You saw the room?" I didn't answer. "You found my bed?" My hands trembled. "Who are you?" I whispered. There was a long pause. Then the voice answered softly. "You really don't recognize me." The door handle turned slowly. Locked. He chuckled quietly. "That's okay," he said. "You didn't recognize yourself either." My blood ran cold. "What?" The voice grew closer to the door. "Check the camera again." My heart pounded as I grabbed my phone and opened the last recorded clip. The attic footage replayed. The thin man stepped into view again, looked at the camera, smiled. But this time I noticed something I hadn't seen before. The shape of his face, the scar above his eyebrow, the curve of his jaw. My hand began shaking, because the man in the attic looked exactly like me. The voice outside the door whispered one final sentence. "You moved into my house." Then the footsteps walked away, back toward the attic, leaving me alone in the bedroom, with the terrible realization that I didn't remember living here before, and the even worse realization that the man in the attic